bone and sickle, bleeding saints and forest witches, the past unburied, the books unsealed, the old celebration returning.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bone and Sickle. I'm your host, Al Ridenour, recording this quick announcement before our main show by myself. Mrs. Carswell will be back with us next time when we'll be updating you together on any progress made by Dr. Bartush on our little situation with the house. That's coming before the end of the month, but that's not all. As is our custom, we'll be offering a special something for Bone and Sickle listeners in honor of the Halloween season. This year, we're inviting you to take part in a special interactive fortune-telling show on October 30th. So that you might best enjoy this event, I wanted to provide some advanced instructions which should prove helpful. First, you should have on hand a deck of cards, just an ordinary deck from which you'll be shuffling and drawing your own cards during the show. If for some reason you're not able to obtain one by then, we'll also have instructions for using a virtual online deck as an alternative. More importantly, we're suggesting you make arrangements to enjoy this experience with friends. In particular, friends born under a variety of zodiac signs, those other than your own, as fortunes will be determined in conjunction with your particular sign. It's a system of fortune-telling I found recently in a 19th century cartomancy book, though it purports to be much older, ostensibly created by the ancient Greek sage Pythagoras. As it might be a bit difficult to assemble the ideally variegated in-person gathering, you can instead do this. Between now and October 30th, make a list of friends organized by their signs, and during the show you can draw cards on their behalf and report their fortunes back to them, if they're not too upsetting, of course. Otherwise, you can just have a little secret about them. If you're particularly hungry for seasonal ghoulies and ghosties content, I'll remind you about our bonus episodes. The one for October will be particularly seasonal in that way. The bonus shows are available with the Patreon memberships or via Apple Podcasts. And now, onto our show, episode 146, Urban Legend. While researching Spook Show episodes back in 2020, I saw a couple passing references to a chaotic midnight show held on Halloween in 1968. It was at a drive-in in Illinois at which the 1936 film The Invisible Ray was one of the movies screened, which is what you're hearing.
Caught here and electrically transferred.
I had no idea at the time how much there was to the story. Earlier this year, something prompted me to do some research, and I ended up going down a rabbit hole, or several rabbit holes, newspaper archives, discussion boards, and some email exchanges, trying to find out more about that particular event. What I thought would just offer a nice dose of mischievous Halloween nostalgia ended up leading me to some rather puzzling story threads, some not particularly pleasant, if true. The Spook Show in question happened in Danville, Illinois, and I've not managed to track down anyone who attended it, but the father of Danville resident Steve Blakey did, and that connection to the event led Blakey to dig up materials on the topic with the intent of possibly writing a book. He even managed to dig up an old radio ad for the show and was kind enough to share it with us. It's from the archives of the now-defunct radio station WDWS in the Illinois town of Champaign-Urbana, about a half hour west of Danville. Imagine now It's October of 1968, and this comes over your radio.
This Halloween at the Moonlight Drive-In in Danville, see The Invisible Ray with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, The Uninvited with Ray Milland, and a horrifying midnight spook show. Meet the mad doctor who will summon spirits from space. From another world they speak. Voices of the dead. Voices from Mars. You will hear them right next to you inside your own car. Will they touch you? Will they kill you? You will never forget this one-of-a-kind, terrifying experience. At the Moonlight Drive-In on South Bowman Highway, right next to Off the Bone Barbecue in Danville, Illinois, this Halloween.
The only thing that was written about the event at the time is a short blurb appearing in an October 28th issue of the Danville News-Gazette in a roundup of events of the week. This listed under October 31st.
The Moonlight Drive-In will screen two frightful golden oldies, The Invisible Ray, starring Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, and The Uninvited with Ray Milland. Following the screening will be a live Halloween Spook Show event. At midnight, Dr. Killer Hertz will be summoned, and space spirits will, quote, appear inside every car, unquote. Local musicians, the Wildcats, will also perform. Moonlight owner Jay Jolly will not say if he will be part of the Spook Show, but has done so in the past. Most recently, in conjunction with last Halloween's screening of King Kong Escapes, Jolly appeared in a pith helmet and safari ensemble, presenting a live monkey as King Kong Jr.
Then there's the address and times, along with a publicity photo of what must be Mr. Jolly wearing a glittery cape and standing in front of what looks like old radio receivers and other gear. It's captioned,
Dr. Killer Hertz will contact space spirits.
I'll post the image and a display ad for the event in our show notes if you'd like to see them. Now, what initially caught my eye was a November 1st story, again in the News-Gazette, that describes the event becoming chaotic.
A Halloween spook show at the Moonlight Drive-In ended in chaos on Thursday night, with police and ambulance called to the site. Reckless driving by those exiting early resulted in several fender benders, with one car hitting the refreshment stand, causing damage to the facility and injury to the driver. The driver was taken to St. Jude's Hospital for minor injuries. Several teenagers were also treated on site for injuries not requiring further care. Lieutenant Rick Brunetti reported that 6 citations were issued, but no arrests were made, adding that he does not expect any serious charges to be filed. Young people can get out of control at things like this, he said, and it's up to the adults to not set the stage for disaster. When it's after midnight and on Halloween, you're dealing with a tinderbox. Moonlight owner and event producer Jay Jolly did not comment on the mishaps, but says he expects the drive-in to be closed temporarily for repairs.
The one other thing that appeared at the time was a disgruntled letter to the editor on November 3rd.
We live behind the Moonlight Theater and usually have no issues with that, but the events of this Halloween were disturbing. The band performing and other noises were excessive, including the sudden and non-stop honking from cars. A dozen yards from our home, there is an access road that runs behind the screen, which was damaged when one of the cars drove into our private fence along that road, breaking a post and tearing down a wire. We also had trespassers from the drive-in, as many as 24 kids walking right through our yard as if they didn't know where they were. I have not received a response from the Moonlight owner on this, so I am hoping that publishing this may help bring his attention to the matter. Bob McCallum.
So you're thinking there was little property damage and reckless teenage foolishness at a Halloween event in Illinois decades ago. You're wondering why I would dedicate an entire episode to a single goofy spook show that got out of hand. Well, it was a 2001 article, again, News-Gazette, that really pulled me in. It suggested that some surprising local folklore had developed around this one event. It's from a weekly column called Looking Back, which generally just seems to recycle decades-old stories of events that happened in that particular calendar week. But the reporter got a little ambitious on this one and actually added some new information of her own. It starts with a paragraph about a Halloween decoration mistaken for a real dead body in 1992, but most of the extra-long column is about our event, or stories around it. It's under the heading,
Voices from... It seems everyone has a story about it, but no one seems to agree on the details. We're talking about the 1968 Halloween show at the drive-in that once stood on the site of Sturmer's Swap Meet. You can still see the skeleton of the old screen that was never completely torn down, and the faint outline of the word moon that was once part of the venue's name. Moonlight Drive-In. That's right, moonlight was 2 separate words back then. All we know for sure is that 2 old horror re-releases screened, The Invisible Ray and The Uninvited, that a long-gone garage band called the Wildcats played, and that there was some special guest billed as Dr. Killer Hertz. Somehow the good doctor seems to have incited a riot, or at least some serious traffic mayhem.
Skipping ahead a bit to an important detail.
The real trouble began when Dr. Hertz announced that the space spirits would be speaking through each car's radio. This was before drive-ins generally used radio to transmit the movie soundtrack. The in-car speakers for that purpose were all supposedly turned off and hung on their posts, and the radios were turned and dialed to an unused frequency. That's when people began hearing things and panicking.
She goes on to describe the accidents and emergency response in mostly the same terms we've heard, and then...
I know what you're thinking. Isn't it possible the drive-in owner was just trying out his new radio transmitter, exploiting its novelty before he ditched those clunky, hardwired speakers and made the switch to dashboard sound? Impossible, said Lucinda Evans, a waitress at G&B's Cafe. She says she was there that night and insists there was much more going on. How does she know? Everyone knows. The story, as it's come to be told, was that everyone heard different messages and different voices. Evans said she immediately recognized the voice speaking in her car. It was the voice of her recently deceased grandmother. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but I knew her immediately. It sounded like it was coming from a long way off, but it was clear enough to know who it was. What did she say? Evans shakes her head and flashes a pained smile as if to say, I've said enough. Other stories you hear, second or third hand of course, mention a space alien. Or was it Dr. Killer Hertz floating overhead that night, and the possibility of tuning into that spooky frequency even to this day? But I didn't get to ask Evans about any of this. Every time I tried, it seemed there was a drink across the room needing to be topped off. Thirsty crowd down there at G&B's. Maybe next Halloween some space spirits will tell me the whole story.
It seems that between 1968 and this 2001 article, some local folklore really did blossom. And I don't know if it was a slow, continuous gestation or if suddenly in the 1980s or 90s, full-formed myths just attached themselves to some half-remembered drive-in story from the 60s. There's nothing in print from that period, but throughout the 2000s, you can trace some of this in online forums. On one of the comment boards on Illinois Paranormal, there's a huge section on EVPs and a 2008 subthread under RVP for radio voice phenomena, which is largely about this Danville story. A commenter going by Dib writes,
I have a friend in Danville who claims there is a frequency on AM radio in the area that people have been tuning into for two-way communication with entities. You have to be local, and some say even in a certain spot to pick it up. So don't bother asking me what it is because you probably can't pick it up, but he was pretty spooked. He says the channel was supposed to be opened by an occultist back in the 60s or 70s, a spiritualist who was also a ham radio guy.
Then there's a long debate about ham versus AM radio, scolding comments about them being unrelated, of course. But then somebody named Mystique Girl chimes in.
You're talking about the drive-in owner who did a Halloween broadcast that caused some sort of mass hysteria. I'm from Danville, and there's a swap meet, the drive-in site, where people go at night to try to pick up the frequency. It's best if you do it on Halloween, LOL. People say they hear voices calling them by name. So someone spray-painted graffiti on the one standing part of the old screen. It said, "The radio knows your name." I used to see it when I drive by for about a year, until someone painted over it, maybe in 2006 or 7.
There's some debate about how people might have heard individualized messages and recognized their names. Someone called SH457 posts,
Pretty sure I know how this went down. He probably had people turn to the end of their AM dial where there's nothing but static. People tend to project patterns on the white noise, hear things they're predisposed to hear. It's called pareidolia. That would account for it.
There's some agreement on that and discussion of the spirit box used by ghost hunters. If you're not familiar with that device, it rapidly scans radio frequencies to create a sort of white noise that occasionally produces discernible words. Some commenters see this as another example of pareidolia, and others insist the spirits manipulate radio waves to produce EVPs or RVPs. A skeptic, Embis202, writes,
I'm from Danville. Never heard of it. You people are crazy.
And another, ex-Cossack, writes,
I remember that. My friend's uncle or dad was at that show, and people were just losing their minds. They had to close the schools the next day.
So this seemed like something verifiable via the News-Gazette archive, and it does seem to be true, at least the closures date. A brief mention in the November 1st edition says,
School closures Friday. Danville high schoolers will be getting extended Halloween this Friday, as all public high schools will close early for the weekend. A burst water main occurring overnight at Jameson High School necessitated Friday closure, with Danville High and Montclair High following suit, according to what the school board terms reciprocal agreement. No elementary schools or private schools will be closed, and all schools are expected to be open Monday.
Nothing about mass hysteria, but at least an odd coincidence. The reciprocal agreement note seems odd, as does the fact that it's only high schools closing. Since it was a midnight show, there probably wouldn't have been a lot of elementary school kids there. So maybe there's something to that. A couple more comments. Dell911.
Since it was Halloween, don't you think people might have been a bit overexcited, expecting to hear ghosts?
Mystique Girl responds,
Who said it was ghosts? Maybe they were voices from space, a higher vibratory realm, as my hippie mom would say.
And then Dib returns to the conversation a few days later.
Talk to my Danville friend. The new crazy detail. There was supposed to be an antenna buried under Sturmer's swamp back in the drive-in days, and it was picking up voices. Kids supposedly went down there to listen on radios and scare themselves. Or used to.
Another source with a few relevant posts is Reddit's Urban Legends forum with state-by-state Halloween sections. Looking under Illinois, I found Danville mentioned in 2008 by someone calling themselves Unluck78. His story may not be related, but it starts the thread. He writes,
This one's in Danville. It was in the 70s, and it was a magic show at a private Halloween party at one of the mansions down on Willowcrest. The magician levitated, and the guests were all found dead. They jumped out the windows. He used hypnosis to get inside their minds. They never found the magician.
And another poster respond,
I'm not sure how anyone knew he levitated if all the guests died.
And another,
I heard the guests thought they could fly too. Ha ha.
Then we get a bit more on topic. Lost Patrol writes,
You're thinking of a Halloween show at the Danville Drive-In, where Sturmer's Swamp is now. Like you say, it was back in the early 70s when they would sometimes have special live events after the film, especially for Halloween. During a magic show, the magician levitated and there was mass hysteria.
Galena Girl responds,
From what I heard, it was a magician doing a seance or something, who got people worked up, warning them that there was some sort of ghost or ghost of a killer materialized, and he was trying to get into people's cars. He was telling people to lock their doors and stay in their cars, and then people heard a voice on their radio saying, You don't need to lock your doors. You can't see me, but I'm already in your car. That's why people panicked.
Then the actual historian of the topic, I mentioned at the top of the show, Steve Blakey, posts under the name Wilco Roger 8. I only got his real name after getting in touch personally. He says,
I must have heard this story 100 times from my dad, who was actually there. There's lots of misinformation, like this murderer on the loose story. He said there was kind of a mad scientist angle in the Invisible Ray film, and that there was a bunch of old radio gear set up that was supposed to be used to talk to the space people. There was an operator sitting in the sort of laboratory they put together on stage, and he was dressed like a spaceman with a big round space helmet and a glittery cape, which would have been identical to the one you see in the publicity photo.
Then he posts a link to the publicity photo from the 1968 event promo.
The thing is, the operator, whom he called Dr. Killer Hertz, was just a dummy. Jolly and the dummy wore matching outfits, and at some point there was a switch, so the audience thought that Jolly was floating up above the crowd. The round helmet was just a helium balloon with a cape attached. That's when people saw flying. Looking back, that's what my dad decided. I think he's right. So that's what people were following, or supposed to follow, when they heard the voice on their car radio say, Follow me. We think that Jolly had some stooges in the audience planted to distract people, get them riled up, and start trying to follow the balloon.
One person comments,
Or that they projected him on the screen.
And Blakey responds,
You have no idea what you're talking about.
And with that, he leaves the forum. There's one last post, maybe not related, but interesting. Reversed Jim writes,
Haha, I never got that pun. We had a Dr. Killer Hertz story in Indiana, in Crown Point, but I thought it was Hertz.
He spells it H-U-R-T-S. He continues,
He was a ghost of a murderous doctor who used hypnosis to get his patients to kill themselves. The ghost can still get inside your mind. When you tell a story, you're supposed to stop and ask, Are you picturing him, maybe imagining him outside the house, which they probably are? Then say, Dr. Hertz, put the image inside your mind. That's the first step of him getting in. Good Halloween story.
In the emails I ended up trading with Blakey, he let me know he'd made some other posts about the event, but around 2015 removed those and decided to just set up his own webpage sharing information he'd gathered. In 2020, he took down that page, I'm guessing because he was thinking of producing the book he told me about, or he was just unhappy with comments, seems possible. His version of the story, which was roughed out in the post, seems to me to best incorporate elements that appear in the earliest newspaper accounts, including references to a Dr. Killer Hertz figure, and even the passing reference in the 2001 Looking Back article to a flying space alien. He even mentions Jolly's glittery cape from that publicity photo. His take on the subject is skeptical. He agrees that Jolly was probably making the switch to a low-power radio sound system at the time and exploiting it as a horror gimmick, as suggested. But aspects of the story, or stories, he couldn't explain didn't interest him, and he became sort of annoyed when they were brought up. I had this sense that he was maybe filling in some details missing in his father's account with what he found in early newspaper stories. Unfortunately, I couldn't speak to his father, whom he said had passed away several years earlier. And at some point, I probably asked too many annoying questions, and he just stopped replying to me. People do that. While it's hard to get to the bottom of what happened at the 1968 event, we do have some concrete information about Jay Jolly and his business ventures. An article in the News-Gazette by Ann Kaminsky, dated November 10th, 1975, so 7 years after the Spook Show, is headlined,
Beloved Drive-In sold. The Moonlight Drive-In on South Bowman Highway, which has been closed since 1968, has been purchased by K. Sturmer Enterprises. Spokesperson Doug Sturmer says the lot will be used for swamp meat. We're hoping to be up and running in the early spring, barring anything unforeseen, he says. The eye-catching neon marquee.
Blah, blah, blah. Skipping forward a bit, he says the screen will stay, etc. Then Kaminsky turns her attention to Jay Jolly himself, whom she says also runs Jolly's, a bar in the entertainment district. And then the story becomes more a local color piece rather than about a new swap meet opening. She writes,
Though he receded from view after the theater's closure and rarely makes appearances in his bar, Mr. Jolly definitely lived up to his name in our discussion, cracking jokes and offering playfully enigmatic resistance when pushed for straight answers. He's every bit the larger-than-life personality one would expect of a theater owner. When asked if he's happy the drive-in screen will remain standing, he said, It's Sturmer's now. He can burn it down for all I care. I'll bring the marshmallows. Jolly hints at troubles the moonlight has brought him over the years, including those of the final show on Halloween 1968. That night, he says, vehicles recklessly attempting to simultaneously exit caused multiple collisions and damaged the theater's snack bar. When asked why he never made the repairs and reopened, he answers, I don't think that's what the spirits had in mind. They wanted me in the spirit business. That's what I think. You mean your bar downtown? He laughs and changes the topic. Mr. Jolly was known for performing on a small stage in front of the drive-in screen, adding a live element to the screenings and drawing capacity crowds with his wacky stunts. Turnout was especially big for spooky Halloween events, which drew young people from miles around. He often would be joined by local music groups and costumed performers, livening things up with various gimmicks, including an appearance by a live ape, a giant glowing brain, and flying ghosts. Since the Moonlight's closure, Jolly has hosted a few magic nights at his bar and performed magic at the Kiwanis Fall Fest, as well as private parties. But, he says, he's unable to get out as much as he'd like due to the needs of his wife, who has been homebound since 1968 and requires ongoing care.
Then the article goes on to provide some quotes from a few locals who recall some happy memories at the drive-in, but nothing more that's relevant. So from that article, I get the impression that Jolly was generally an agreeable, quirky guy. From that and from the fact that we already know he was an impresario behind spook shows. But then I did some digging using the name of his bar, Jolly's. Jolly's as a plural, not an apostrophe possessive, by the way. And this gave me a whole other impression, at least if certain posts are to be trusted. It actually gets pretty dark. That is stuff I found on a Danville Memories forum under a subheading Entertainment District, which seems to be mainly about how the place turned into a dump in the late 70s or early 80s. It's implied that Jolly's was one of the worst, along with a place called Fox's. Both got attention from Vice, supposedly, and then sometime after 1984, Jolly must have sold his place, since I see a new name listed at the same location. The comments pile on regarding the usual issues, cleanliness, watered-down drinks, and sketchy characters. But they also mention Jolly himself, who apparently lived upstairs. The posts span a number of years, mostly from 2003 and some later in 2005. Barbala77 writes,
I always thought Jolly was creepy, and people say he did things with that monkey, if you know what I mean.
Ignoring that last part, it's interesting to hear about a monkey. I'd assumed the animal in the show had been borrowed or rented for the event or events, but apparently not. And then Res2Res writes,
Agree. That guy gave me the creeps, and he'd sometimes just stare in a freaky way.
Cammy writes,
We called him Radio Man. I didn't know he was the owner. He looked like a bum.
Barbala77 says,
Why radio? But he did look kind of dirty and confused, like a bum. And there was that nurse that would come with him, supposedly, for his wife.
Side Pocket MK enters the conversation.
You never heard the radio noises?
No Name is the Best Name enters.
The smell was probably the monkey. Not.
Then Barbala77.
The nurse, in quotes, was live-in. She mainly came and went when he did. Probably one of the entertainers of our lovely entertainment district. Haha.
Ms. Manto enters.
These posts are so nasty. I worked at the bar in the 70s. Mr. Jolly was a kind, decent man. Not at all what you people are making him out to be. I think Miss Lynn was a therapist, not a nurse, but she was always sweet to me, also. She stayed upstairs, but had a place of her own somewhere else. I feel sorry for all of you, all wasting time trashing something that's decades long gone already.
There are some responses, but mainly attacking Ms. Manto, nothing about Jolly himself, and we don't hear from her again. And then Barbala77.
You don't keep a monkey and sick woman in the same apartment if you're such a kind, decent man.
And Cammy again.
All those weird radio noises. I get chills thinking about what happened. I remember being there and hearing the noises for hours, especially when it wasn't crowded. You could hear them through the ceiling.
Side Pocket MK re-enters the conversation.
Barbola77 is right. If that poster did really work there, she wasn't around at the end and probably doesn't even live in Danville, or she would have known what happened. Jolly had her totally fooled. I wonder why he was so nice to her anyway.
Res2Res.
I know he just left her in the room, which seems f***ed up, but I'm not sure he even knew what he was doing. Seemed like he was kind of off in his own world. I don't know. Maybe he was just scared or didn't realize what happened.
And then Cammy.
I think he left the shortwave on so he could talk to her after she died.
Someone named Trev Time enters.
She died in the room? Where did he go? I was not around in 1984, but this is juicy. How have I not heard this?
Side Pocket MHK.
You could smell something bad in the bar. That place was a circle of hell.
And Res to Res.
He just disappeared.
Then No Name is the Best Name pops back in.
I've heard some dark shit about Jolly. I didn't believe it till I heard about the paralyzed wife.
And Trev Time.
He left her to die? What about the nurse? The monkey?
Res to Res.
That flea-bitten thing was 100 years old. It was turning white.
Side Pocket MHK.
It knew how to use the shortwave. LOL.
Cammy.
The thing I can't get out of my mind is the monkey sitting in the dark with the dead wife a couple feet away. Chills! It just gives me chills. They should burn that place down.
And Res to Res.
It was in front of the mic. It was probably talking to someone. That's what they saw when they broke down the door.
And then Trev Time.
No way! Holy